I think we can give 3 more minutes to the people incoming so that everybody is settled in. We're going to be starting in the next 3 minutes so that we can give a chance to the people who are still coming in to settle in. Okay, I see a number of people have joined in, so maybe we can kickstart this session. My name is Lillian Carey. I'm handling business advocacy at the East African Business Council. Our webinar today is on the impact of COVID-19 on businesses in the East Africa community and the recovery strategy. So I will start off by just giving you the rules of being on this session. And number one, of course, is you have to mute your microphone so that we are together. And number two is you have to ensure that you switch off your video when you're not speaking. And number three, you have to respect the panelists' views. If you want to contribute, you're going to do so at the end of the meeting or when we have the Q&A session. And you should ensure that you stay on point and on time. And in this discussion, we are discussing issues on regional perspectives. And so when we are having the topic, you need to focus on the topic, and the questions can be sent on the chat room on anybody's WhatsApp that you have, so that now later on we can be able to incorporate all the questions and ask them at the end of the meeting. And this meeting will be recorded for reporting purposes. So also remember that for anybody who is coming in and they do not understand what the East African Business Council is, we define ourselves as the regional apex body of private associations and corporates in the East Africa region. And our key goal is to ensure that we drive the East Africa community integration process through trade and investment, with our key agenda being to ensure a borderless East Africa community. Now, this conversation today, we're going to be looking at the impact of COVID-19 on businesses in the EAC, and also at the end of it, we are going to come up with recovery strategy. So I'm going to start off by introducing the session, and then later, after introducing the session, we will have our Executive Director, Dr. Peter Mathoki, who is going to come in and give perspective to the presentation, and then later on, he's going to introduce Dr. Kirsten, who comes from GIZ, which is the company that is collaborating with EABC for this study. And after that, we are going to have the presentation by Geoffrey Kamanzi, who is our manager in trade in services. And then after that, we're going to have a discussion with your questions and answers. And then we're going to conclude the session with some closing remarks. So I'll just give a perspective of exactly what is going on. We have to note that the disruption caused by COVID-19 cannot be understated, from job losses to also some people have been laid off when the companies are cutting down on costs. Also, we have as countries in the East African region, we are countries that really depends on the export market. There have been a lot of challenges, knowing that our goods cannot move to the countries that they used to, particularly Europe, and also like in terms of getting goods from China for our market. So a lot of disruption has happened in the last couple of days. And this discussion here is we want to see the extent of which COVID-19 has disrupted businesses. In some areas, there are some things which have not gone wrong. But for instance, the tourism area, and we also have the hospitality sector. We have, in terms of exports, we also have issues in remittances, because some people, the countries in East Africa really depend on remittances when your cousins or relatives are able to send you money. But in this period of time, we've been able to see that a lot of money has not been sent in because people are just struggling or looking to stay afloat. At the East African Business Council, we have been doing a number of work to ensure that we continue advocating for your issues, some of them being undertaking various analysis on the impact of COVID-19. We've also been we've been holding online webinars. We've also been conducting surveys, such as these on which you're set to share our feedback, or actually the analysis of the report we came up with from coming up with the survey. We've also been intervening at various border points and also doing various advocacy work. If you have been looking at in the media, we've been really trying to push the agenda of having a borderless East Africa community. So Geoffrey Kamanzi is going to be giving the presentation, and then after that, we're going to be able to see how COVID-19 has impacted on businesses. And then if you have questions, you can bring them forward during this session, and then you're going to get responses. So I will start by introducing our Executive Director, Dr. Peter Mathoki. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Lillian, and good afternoon to all of us who are participating in this very important event, webinar, that, of course, as the East African Business Council, in collaboration with GIZ, we undertook. And this is, again, as a background of the fact that the disruptive impact of COVID, of course, on the global and regional, trade, has been experienced, and of course, data and information has been scanty, and therefore, again, as that we thought it is important that we bring out data that is scientific, statistics, and data to understand the magnitude of how different sectors have been affected by business, but also importantly on how to support the business rebounds back into business, because that's the most important task now. regional integration, we all know, is a must and is something that we must collectively support. And as the treaty establishing the community says, much as, of course, is the people-centered, but it is private sector driven. And therefore, it is our responsibility as the apex body of the private sector in the region to scan the situation as it were in the region and come up with some proposals on how to support different businesses get back into business. Therefore, this is an important event. It will be a presentation by one of us. Will be taking us through this, and then obviously there will be cues, and our good Lillian, as she introduced, she'll be able to manage that session. And as we did with as EABC, we did this along with our partners, GIZ, and Dr. Kirsten is here with us today. And I thank you, Dr. Kirsten. And of course, all of you have created time to join. And now we wish to invite Dr. Kirsten to give her remarks, and then over back to Lillian. But for now, please let us, all of us, enjoy the presentation, and let us not shy away from interacting with the session. Thank you very much. Dr. Kirsten, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Let me put my video on. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thanks, Peter and the team from EABC to doing the study and organizing this webinar. I'm really curious to see some of the outcomes, and I'm sure it will interest and will be important for many companies and businesses in East Africa. Let me say a few words on things probably which are known. I don't need to say that we are in a phase of a global crisis, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that this is not East Africa or Africa. It's not an Asian economic crisis, neither a European, it's a global. So all countries, all regions are affected almost similarly, although the symptoms may be rather different. And this is important, I think, in the context of where we work and where we live. So in terms of course, donor coordination, development partner cooperation, it's important to remember that there's a crisis in Europe, there's a crisis in the USA, there's a crisis in Asia and in Africa. So we are all together, I should say, in this boat. Let me just say one word, by the way, on GIZ. We are not a company, as has been introduced. We are the implementing agency of the German government. So our funding comes from the German government, and we are working closely here in Arusha with the EAC Secretariat and with the East African Business Council on helping to push the integration, the EAC integration agenda forward. I will say a few words more on this, but let me first say something to and about the private sector. Peter has said it, and I think it's mentioned somewhere in the introductory papers. It's the private sector that we need to support, because I personally believe in Africa it's mostly currently an economic crisis, and we need to support the private sector to continue doing their business. On the other hand, I also want to stress that most likely in most sectors, we don't need to do a lot different than what we have been doing and what we have been supporting, which means helping companies to cooperate, of course, in East Africa, to be more competitive, to be more productive, and to be more innovative. I think in crisis in general, you need to do more of what you need to do anyway. It's really a plea to remember this is not new or different. We need to even more now look at the strengths and focus on those and the opportunities. I think this is also true for East African integration. Integration is important. It's always been important. It's even more important now. I know EABC is active, has been active throughout the past months. We are doing seminars, webinars, online trainings. It's even more important now. The cooperation in East Africa continues and accelerates, I would even say. A few words where we are focusing on currently, and we have been working and focusing more on sectors, agro-processing sectors, pharmaceutical sector, service sectors such as tourism, and of course, as has been mentioned, tourism is hardly hit by the crisis. Again, now the question is how to be innovative, how to deal with the crisis, which we can't change. Nobody can change the crisis, but what we can think jointly about what to do. Focus on domestic markets, new digital tools, etc., etc. And of course, in this context, I should also say, just as an example, e-commerce, worldwide e-commerce technology firms are probably benefiting from this crisis. And there's great companies in East Africa that are developing innovations, and e-commerce is up and coming. We have a project, and many other development partners obviously support e-commerce and digital transformation, which is, again, even more important as it has been half a year, 1 year ago. Let me just close with saying one little word of caution. I also want to say, and again, because it's a global crisis, it is most likely that there will not be more support and more resources. Europe has a recovery plan, Germany has a recovery plan, USA has a recovery plan. They're supporting companies in their countries. They continue supporting African governments and businesses, but it cannot be expected that the support from development partners will double or triple. So again, a need for even more cooperation, more efficiency, to coordinate activities, to not double do the same thing, but do things effectively and productively. As we have been doing with EABC, thanks again, Peter and team. We continue working together. We have been here throughout the past months. We'll be here throughout the next months and years. And now I'm looking forward to the presentation. Just one word I would like to say, Peter, maybe it comes at the end. I think the outcome of the presentation, it would be good to also communicate it in different channels to a wide target and audience. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirsten. Dr. Kirsten is the GIZ EAC cluster manager, who is very close to the private sector. And here, GIZ is a strategic development partner in the framework of the GDC, which is the German Development Corporation. So it's important to note that this is one of the webinars that we will be having, alongside other webinars that we will be having in the next coming weeks. So as I introduce Geoffrey Kamanzi, who is the manager in charge of trading services, he is going to give us a perspective on the findings of the survey, and then from that we are going to have the Q&A session. So karibu sana Geoffrey.
Thank you, Lilian. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Kirsten, for those introductory words. Quite important. As mentioned, my name is Geoffrey Kamanzi. I'm the manager in the policy department, which is specifically in charge of trading services at the EABC Secretariat in Arusha. And I'm happy to take you through the outcomes from the survey and the study that was undertaken by EABC to capture the impact of COVID-19 to business and investment in the EAC and proposed recovery strategies for the EAC economies. Can I get a witness that you can hear me? All right.
Yes, please use slideshow.
Oh, okay.
Loud and clear.
Great. Put on the slideshow. so that you can be able to view the prism better. All right. Bit of okay. So maybe just to take you for the benefit of those that may not know EABC. But can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can, Geoffrey.
Thank you. Just to echo into the moderator's words in introducing EABC, we are the regional apex, the only regional apex body representing private associations and corporates in East Africa. And our single mandate or purpose driving the East African community integration process through trade and investment, established in 1997. And our major work is to aim is to foster the interests of the private sector with a vision of a borderless East Africa for trade and investment. I can say, so help us God. So we operate through sectoral desks, and these are desks that help as a platform to channel advocacy through. And we have various sectoral desks, one being in trading services, which is under my docket, then one on manufacturing, agriculture, SMEs, as well as energy and infrastructure, which channel advocacy through those particular sectoral desks. Our major function is basically research for evidence-based policy advocacy, as well as advisory services, analysis and market intelligence on regulatory developments in the EAC. And these are our core functions, and these have been really able to help us help our members. For the benefit also for those that don't know how we are structured, EABC is a secretariat, but we operate under national focal points. In Burundi, we work under the Chambre fédérale de commerce et d'industrie du Burundi. That's the Burundi Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In Tanzania, I operate under Tanzania Private Sector Foundation. In South Sudan, we operate under the South Sudan Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. In Kenya, our national focal point is KEPSA, Kenya Private Sector Alliance. And in Rwanda is Private Sector Federation and the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda. Straight to the business of today, globally, and the global perspective, the outbreak of COVID has really impacted the global economy. And the global economic growth is projected to fall by to -3%. And as projected by the World Bank, the decline in East Africa's economic growth is to decline from 2.4% in 2019 to between -2.1 and -5.1 in 2020 by the end of the 2020. However, among the economies that will still stay a bit afloat is the economy of the United Republic of Tanzania, estimated to grow at 5.5% in 2020. As projected by AFDB, and this is a bit the highest of all the other partner states' economic growth. The pandemic is also projected to cost East Africa partner states between $39 billion to 79 billion in terms of output losses, and the loss of GDP will be reduced on household and business spending at about 50%. And also disruption to supply chains for key inputs at about 30%, and tourism majorly being affected at a rate of 30%. The negative impact on economy is due basically to the result of measures such as closures of airports, which have really hampered the flow of goods, movement of people, as well as services across, closure of borders, temporary closure of borders, imposition of curfews, which have really stifled the economic activities being undertaken by each partner states. The social and physical distancing, as well as lockdowns, these have really led to these disruptions, but nevertheless, we don't disregard them. They are necessary, but definitely it's just to bring out its economic impact to doing business in the EAC region. The major sectors impacted are transport and logistics, distribution, trade, general trade, and retail, manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, construction, education, air travel, among others. And now on basically in the intra-EAC trade at the regional level, as we all know, over 51% of EAC exports are destined to countries that have highly been impacted by COVID, for example, China and Europe, while 53% conversely of its imports originate from such highly impacted countries. So this effect in terms of outbound and inbound flow of goods has been really affected, given that our exports cannot reach where they are supposed to be destined to, well as our imports that are coming to, for example, complement or help the manufacturing sector also have been not coming as expected. Hence, the manufacturing and other sectors and agriculture that survive because of the source of our inputs and fertilizers. The issue has been on disruption on movement of such products. However, we have continued to see the sector of pharmaceutical supplies not being really so much affected because the people have to survive. So we have seen at least the pharmaceutical sector staying afloat for a bit. Also, as a result of COVID-19, the supply and demand shocks has impacted trade in goods and services in the EAC, and the disruption of global supply chain has impacted negatively on demand of EAC exports. Case in point is flowers, vegetables, and fruits, as well as other fresh produce that were coming from the East African region as a major exporter, for example, to Europe. They have faced issues of crossing over to the destined regions due to issues of cargo space, as well as cargo freight due to temporary closures of cargo movement of airlines. Still too, on intra-EAC trade, the disruptions caused by the supply shocks have resulted in shortage of raw materials, capital goods, intermediate goods, and finished products, which are critical for domestic production. So this really has been seen as a major effect. Maybe to talk about the results or findings from this EABC snapshot survey that was undertaken. This was more to do with looking at specific sectors that were assumed to be affected adversely by the pandemic, major being the construction, consultants in terms of services, ICT, event management, financial sector, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and real estate, retail, as well as tourism and hospitality, but not forgetting logistics, transport and logistics. So in the respondents that we got, the construction sector, in terms of reduction on cash flows, the real estate and tourism and hospitality, logistics, as well as real estate, demonstrated that it will be affected in terms of cash flow. And this survey, of course, established that tourism, logistics, and retail have significantly experienced a higher percentage of reduction of cash flow of 92%, 75%, and 63% respectively. The other sectors are real estate, of course, as I mentioned, finance, construction, ICT, etc. But as you see, the 0% on pharmaceuticals, what I was mentioning, has recorded zero effect on cash flow, because at least we've been able to see even pharmacies not being closed as being waived off the closure during curfews and lockdowns. So this has at least our members in the pharmaceutical industry have not been affected. In terms of the extent or major area of effect, in terms of area of supply chain affected, the respondents mentioned that there will be inadequate access to sourcing raw materials, and others are safe at 44.1%. Others will say they will be facing cross-border. They were facing cross-border restrictions, and that's one of the biggest effects. And others at 17% decline of export markets, and also decline in sales at 55.9% as well. They also said there will be a layoff of staff at 17.6%, and other areas in terms of like delay of contracts, reduction of mobile money transactions, and others say there will be none in terms of effect. So you can see really our members think there will be a decline in sales, as well as they'll face cross-border restrictions to move around, get the products or trade across the region as they were supposed to do it. In terms of, we were asking them, how long do you think you could be able to sustain your business during this period? And if you look at the pie chart, 29.4% say they would survive up to a period of 6 months, between 6 to 1 year. 20.6 would say less than 3 months. Still 20.6 would say 3 to 6 months, etc. But you see, one thing to mark is there are not others who are not sure. They are not sure whether they are going to survive or they may not come back to operation. So that's an effect. So that uncertainty itself is an effect. And it is something, you know, when you're dealing with an uncertainty, then it is very difficult to actually plan and to do enough planning for your business. So that's a major thing to note. Maybe to go on a sectoral impact, if I maybe to come back on to the major sectors that will be impacted by this virus. The manufacturing sector, which is one of the critical sectors that have been impacted by the pandemic in terms of sourcing raw materials, both intermediate and capital goods from countries which have been heavily hit by the outbreak. It is expected that COVID-19 will significantly reduce the contribution of manufacturing sector to the regional GDP, which is currently stands at 9.7%. We targeted projected to 25% by 2032. So there will definitely be an effect due to this lack of the slowness in terms of flow of raw materials. Some manufacturers identified opportunities out of the pandemic, however. For example, trying to repurpose production lines and started producing much needed essential items such as face masks, sanitizers, and personal protective equipment. So this is a bit of trying to see how do we work with the new normal? How do we now not depend on areas which are also affected by the virus? Then we saw the regional manufacturers trying to tailor homemade solutions and try to manufacture these products that were rather coming from outside. So in terms of, I will go with each sector, showing its the nature of effect, but also now to go ahead to look at the proposed recovery measures for that particular sector. So on manufacturing, we think that EAC partners need to push for Buy East Africa, Build East Africa, or what they termed as BEA. And the partner states need to provide support to industries to expand their capacity and establish new industry to manufacture imports substitutes in the region. This will definitely cushion the EAC economies from the negative impact of COVID. And the priority sectors to focus on such as textiles, leather, pharmaceuticals, as well as agro-processing. Also, the governments need to commit to doing business with other regional business community and ensure that institutions such as the East Africa Development Bank are recapitalized to be a lending arm through the offering of affordable credit lines to manufacturers. This is very important. So we need to look at the East African Development Bank really playing a very vital role in trying to recapitalize these other banks, regional commercial banks. So it is important that this bank, we think, should be a major turning point in terms of trying to provide a solution to our recovery process. The EAC governments also in collaboration with the private sector should devise alternative means of sourcing products locally and explore new markets. Additionally, EAC governments should consider offering fiscal incentives to heavily affected sectors to prevent them from total collapse. I think we have seen this. At least we appreciate the fact that regional governments, the national governments have announced cushioning funds to major affected sectors such as tourism and hospitality, and this is something that we should applaud our leaders. And this is something that I really think it should be as transparent as could be and easily accessible to our members, especially the SMEs that compose a huge chunk, over 75% of our business players, actually over 80% of our business constituents being SMEs. So we think regional and national governments need to really be as flexible and be as transparent as possible to ensure that the criteria in accessing these cushioning funds is well implemented. So EAC partner states are encouraged to implement coordinated and synchronized fiscal and monetary measures to mitigate the effect of COVID-19 on the region's macroeconomic and financial stability. This is very important. We need, without really a coordinated approach in terms of extending even these cushioning facilities, it is important to really ensure that it is well coordinated and well synchronized, such that and very inclusive in nature, such that nobody is left out, and it is very easy to access. Maybe to continue, is that EAC partner states to consider incentivizing or waiving taxes, administrative charges for companies that have changed production lines amidst COVID-19 to produce protective gears and products, for example, sanitizers, face masks, health and safety equipment. I think we have seen various manufacturers, for example, that have been producing, for example, water or producing other beverages, changing to produce sanitizer. So this is we then, given that they have changed the production line, then governments or revenue collecting agencies need to really ensure that they incentivize them enough, given that now what has been coming from out is not coming as supposed to be, and also we need to promote our own regional production lines. So this is something that we think should be important and take care of these producers. Also, EAC partners to emphasize sustainable EAC regional value chains integration and development from raw materials, intermediate goods, and production of finished products with a view of reducing industrial and trade risks arising out of external shocks. Yeah, it is important that our regional value chains need to be integrated well, such that we are able to source our raw materials region. For example, if someone is producing, let's say in a beverage, then why not get sorghum from Tanzania, and maybe another product comes from Rwanda, then the production is done in Burundi. So we need to ensure that we integrate our value chains as a region to ensure that those supply shocks that I was talking about then are mitigated. The EAC partner states are urged to procure domestically, and domestically I mean regionally. So when I talk about domestic procurement, I mean EAC producing as a domestic market, specifically on health products. And this, if they're produced locally, then definitely we will see jobs being sustained and also expanding over the regional manufacturing base. There's also need to remove of all other charges of equivalent effect, such as import declaration fees, railway development levies for imports of raw materials, capital goods, intermediate goods, essential, and as well as essential goods. Of course, this will provide relief to manufacturers. We need to know that at the moment, the production muscle has been weakened, so it is important that the policymakers also think about removal of some of these levies, because most of these levies are translated to the consumers, transferred to the consumers, and also increase the cost of doing business. So we need to think about how we relax these levies and the charges of equivalent effects. Lastly, on this manufacturing sector, EAC partnership should design a post-COVID recovery plan, which contains incentives that will attract relocation of investors in the manufacturing sector to EAC, to East Africa. So we need to look at how we revise our investment incentives, investment authorities to review the investment incentives such that we can attract investors once again into our market. Another sector that has been adversely affected is the agriculture sector. Agriculture and agro-processing sectors are, of course, are central to our economies, which are contributing between 24 to 44% of the GDP in the 6 partner states. And these are very important because they account for the biggest chunk of the livelihood of around 80% of the region's population. So it is projected that the COVID pandemic and government control actions will reduce global agricultural production by between 2.6 and 7%, while agri-food sectors will decrease by between 13 and 25% in low and middle income countries globally. So this is a very huge reduction. So given that agriculture is a very central sector, and almost 90% of our economies in the region depend on this particular sector. So it's any particular reduction, that reduction is quite huge and very remarkable. So however, we need a lot of cushioning strength on this. Of course, problems with supply chains have already affected exports from some emerging markets and developing economies of perishable products such as flowers, fruits, and vegetables. So, and of course, the pandemic has had a very huge impact on food security. And of course, in addition to the desert locusts that attacked our region, so that it has already exacerbated the effect in food security. So it's very important to note that this reduction will definitely trickle down on people going hungry and lack of raw materials to enhance farm level output. The recovery measures proposed in this particular sector is a regional coordination. The efforts and strategies to put in place to tackle COVID should be implemented at a regional scale rather than a national scale, where when the collective can help protect the most vulnerable countries and prevent the economic and social kickback from the pandemic. Of course, either way, much as we are a block, but we are at different levels of growth as well as different levels of strength. So here is that we need to ensure that if, for example, Kenya is able to, if Uganda, for example, considers itself as a food basket, then Burundi shouldn't go hungry, then Rwanda shouldn't go hungry, then South Sudan shouldn't go hungry. We need to look at the way we have a regional coordination in terms of provision of food and also in terms of food trade. It is well coordinated to ensure that the region stays afloat and people are not subjected to vulnerabilities of food insecurity. We recommend resumption of air cargo transport. Of course, there's a need to liberalize the EAC airspace such that regional and international cargo carriers can pick consolidated products for export from each EAC partner states to Europe, Asia, and America, where they have substantial and consistent demand. I think you all know, apparently almost all the EAC regional, all the EAC countries have an airline, but is it worth it? First of all, or we need maybe to strengthen those that are in operation to help or pick cargo from where the airline is not existing, to help carry their products to the export markets so that the export volumes are sustained. But of course, there has been issues of the EAC space that is not well liberalized, the BASAs or bilateral service agreements signed that are not well implemented, hence limiting the flow of goods from our region to our export destinations. So we would rather, instead of having the vessels, why don't we extend freedoms, especially the fifth freedoms, to these airlines to pick cargo and take the products so that export volumes are not hampered. That's one of our recommendations to our national governments. So there's a need for economic stimulus for this sector. So I was talking about this would definitely cushion it from other export shocks. We need to protect the employment in this particular sector. Agriculture is very huge and contributes hugely to our economies and also provides a lot of jobs. So in the entire value chain, right from the farm to distribution to export and to packaging, etc. So there's need to really for concerted efforts to ensure employers in the agriculture sector protect jobs as a way to maintain available skills and promote continuity and sustainable growth of the sector. There's need also to subsidize importation. EABC governments need to consider zero tax rates where not prior applicable on all inputs, seeds, fertilizer, animal health product, facilitate continuity production. So if you really subject VAT or any other tax or duties to these agro products, then you're really trying to stifle the production as well as distribution. We need, in terms of trade, we need on VAT refunds. There's fast-track payment of VAT refunds owed to agribusiness firms to ensure that speedy recovery of the sector players. Going to tourism and travel, maybe just to give you a bit of a snapshot before COVID. For example, travel and tourism contribution to GDP in 2019 in Burundi was 4.9%. And Kenya was 8.2%, Rwanda was 12.8%, Tanzania 10.1%, and Uganda 5.6%. In terms of employment, contribution to employment, both direct and indirect, in Burundi was at 4.4%, Kenya 8.5%, and Rwanda 11.1%, Tanzania 9%, as well Uganda 5.8%. Maybe looking at the top regional source markets of tourists, in Burundi 46 was Africa, 18 Middle East, Asia and the Pacific 14%, Kenya, Europe being number one as a source market of tourists, 52%, Africa at 20%, Americas at 12%. In Rwanda, of course, Africa 8-9%, Europe 5%, Americas 3%, Tanzania, Europe 34%, Americas 9%, and Uganda, Europe 8%, Americas and Africa 80%. Maybe to look at the effects now, what happened post-COVID, of course, on tourism arrivals and receipts, EAC partnerships will potentially lose up to 5.4 billion of tourists and local spending for the year 2020. And the loss will be felt to affiliated industries such as on the economy. And of course, cities which heavily depend on tourism, such as Mombasa, Arusha, our very own heart of Africa, and Zanzibar will be hit hard by the collapsing of tourism sector. So the 5.4 billion US of tourists on local spending is definitely going to be lost. On revenue, on loss of revenue for East African Airlines, of course, definitely they are still struggling. And of course, they are facing a lot of falling and reduced demand following the outbreak. And in Kenya alone, the pandemic will result to 2.5 million fewer passengers, resulting to 0.54 billion revenue losses, until to risk over 1,365 jobs and 1.1 billion in Kenya's direct economy impact. In Rwanda, the disruptions will lead to $20.4 million in loss in base revenues, and will also put at risk over 3,000 jobs. And if this situation escalates and continues to spread, approximately in Rwanda, $52 million of revenues will be lost. Of course, this means that the average cash reserve of 2 months in the region, airlines are facing, will face liquidity and existential crisis. On the hospitality industry, of course, as a result of the pandemic, of course, we've seen hotels close, and we are just praying that they will reopen again. A few of them we see, for example, a few brands that we know that really closed and have not yet come back. And of course, this has a trickle-down effect on the affiliated services, like the taxi drivers, the tour guides, operators, of course, other recreational centers around the hospitality industry will definitely also be hampered or be affected. The recovery measures in this particular tourism and travel sector is to protect the most vulnerable segments, such as SMEs, self-employed individuals, women and youth, and develop survival mechanism for companies. This is because tourism is a major job creator, especially for more vulnerable groups. So it is important that we all know that these hotels or leisure parlors and casinos employ very many people. So there's a lot of spending in this particular area. So that we need to look at how we protect these vulnerable segments. That is the youth in this sector, the women and the women that are employed by this sector as well. There's a need for strong support in navigating the unparalleled social and economic impact of COVID in the immediate. There's need for urgent fiscal and monetary measures that help protect jobs. That's why I think I talked about this. Of course, those fiscal and coordinated measures, as long as they are coordinated with, we recommend that they should be as inclusive as possible. Coordinated and strong mitigation and recovery plans support the sector can generate massive returns. That's for sure. Then tourism relief funding, that's why I talked about it. For example, in Kenya, has already dedicated $5 million to fund the nation's tourism recovery. Same as Rwanda, I think, has also announced around 1 billion Rwandan francs to the tourism and hospitality industry. But most importantly, we need to promote EAC domestic tourism. If you look at the numbers, the tourists that visit our own region, you find that a huge number come from other areas other than the EAC region. And yet, the leisure products are in our own region. So we need to change our cultural mindset and start promoting regional tourism. On another sector is transport and logistics that has been really hit hard by the pandemic. For the road transport, of course, there's been a lot of effect, even crossing cargo across borders due to various levels of testing capacities that have continued to see in the previous 2 to 3 months, where we would see a stretch of over 200 kilometers line of cargo that moves products. You can imagine products like that are perishable. People that are dealing in perishable products, definitely those ones who were out of business. Products that that really are fast-moving consumable products were delayed, and this was really caused a lot of effects in terms of supply and demand, leading to, of course, to impact on trade across the region. The findings that we had, the survey from the snapshot survey show that transport and logistics sector has experienced a reduction in cash flow by 75%. But maybe to go specific, of course, there's increased operational costs due to cancellation of orders. And of course, in terms of increased transport costs, e.g. Mombasa to Kampala, the cost has increased from $2,000 to $2,400. That's a huge increase. On decline in port throughput, taking Mombasa as an example, there's been a reduction from 3 metric ton in April to 2.7 metric ton by June. On the decline of cargo cleared within 4 days period, an average of 46% in March to 39% in April, and about 60% cleared through ICDN as incurred storage charges. On storage charge surge, the shippers have been paying an average of, for example, take a case, 9 to 11 million Kenyan shillings per month due to delayed cargo clearance. So what we will recommend as recovery, these interventions instituted by these partners to ensure that cargo movement of both essential and non-essential products is not hampered with, because this is very, very important to sustain the trade in the region. Of course, we need also for fiscal assistance in this particular sector, such as loan guarantees, loan tax cuts, payment deferrals, cash handouts. It is, of course, need for speedy authority operations, especially border crossing areas, to avoid overcrowding. That's what I was talking about. Of course, also this sector needs a stimulus fund and subsidies or capital endowments to air and rail operators to ensure that repatriation of nationals where they need to be repatriated. Very large layoffs are expected, especially in airlines, so there's need to question that as well as the shipping lines. Maybe to go straight to, as I wind up on how to look at the short, medium, and long-term interventions. There's need to strengthen critical and systematic important sectors that continue to grow despite global value chain breakdowns. This could include agriculture, food processing, health, pharmaceutical, sanitary industries, as well as ICT. There's also need to identify tailor-made solutions for countries to enable them to navigate trade imbalance disturbances, such as export bans that have been instituted, where we've seen major European countries instituting export bans of particular products, and so we need to look at, as a region, how do we tailor our production lines so that we replace what has been coming from outside. And in the short term, we need to manage our disruptions by identifying the trade impacts on key export sectors, particularly on SMEs, identify new business relations and distribution channels, domestic, especially domestic, manage trade restrictions, rebuild supply capacity, develop digital supply chains. I need to stress that here digitalization of business is quite instrumental, and thanks to GIZ that has been really helping and being on the forefront of digitizing our region. We recommend GIZ's effort and BDI for these energies. We need to develop roadmaps to strengthen transport and logistics capabilities, and to manage as well in order to manage risk. Of course, as I was saying, we need to leverage on digital channels. We have seen like e-commerce has been very instrumental in enabling enabling life or enhancing life during these lockdowns in terms of distribution, use of mobile money and not cash. Basically, ICT has been very instrumental. So we need to leverage this new normal and ensure that they are sustained. We need to build capacity and processes around the new sanitary and work safety rules and food safety compliance, especially for compliance with SPS, health, and other voluntary standards in export markets. So we need to look at how we up our game in ensuring that the center and phytosanitary and measures are well complied to by our members in the production line. So maybe if we need to prioritize, and when we prioritize, we respond to the market needs. And when we respond, we'll definitely recover. And when we recover, of course, we'll have integrated growth. Of course, to build this resilience, we need to chart out medium and long-term value chain risk assessments to help policymakers understand the economic vulnerabilities. We need to identify and plan for sound business environment, especially competition, access to finance, trade facilitation, international logistics for business strengthens resilience. We need to help companies to adopt agile management practices and connect digital platforms and go global through e-commerce. We need to develop strategies for governments to provide online and digital support services for companies, and need to support digitalization of traditional value chains for enhanced quality, traceability, as well as compliance. So this is very important, and I think the EAC Secretariat, the development partners will complement the work that EABC is doing to ensure that we recover steadily from these effects of this pandemic. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I welcome any input, comments, any questions. Over to you, Lillian.
Well, thank you very much. Geoffrey, for the presentation. Just to recap on the key issues that we're looking at, kindly mute your machine. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Geoffrey, for the presentation, which was very detailed. And just to point out some few issues, the survey drew its findings from responses from over hundreds and hundreds of EABC members in the private business sectors in the ESA region, and also to note critically that the survey sought to find out how COVID-19 has affected businesses in the region by looking into the impact of 5 critical areas, which are cash flow, supply chains, employees, herein looking at employees who are laid off or the sustainability of employees in a company, the projected period of business sustainability, and also areas companies are seeking support. Thank you very much, Geoffrey, for that. I see in our inbox we have various questions. So I will kick off by straight asking some few questions because time is not on our side. One of the questions asked is by Franklin Sunday. In Kenya, banks have restructured up to 800 billion shillings in loans to avoid defaults. How has this helped businesses? And given the uncertainty in the recovery, are we likely to see more restructuring of facilities going forward? The second question, what is the impact of COVID-19 on EAC exports and imports to China? And the third question that you can answer at once is, the survey says the pandemic will cost partner states between $37 billion and $79 billion in output losses. What is the percentage of this cost? Let me just recap that. What percentage of this cost will accrue to Kenya, given the size of the country's economy and the EAC? Geoffrey, and in case the policy team wants to assist Geoffrey, kindly do so.
So, Lillian, I may have lost you on the questions. If you don't mind, just quickly go through them again. Sorry.
Okay, from Franklin Sunday in Kenya. In Kenya, banks have restructured up to 800 billion shillings in loans to avoid defaults. How has this helped business? And given the uncertainty in the recovery, are we likely to see more restructuring of facilities going forward? And the second question, maybe I can ask 2 questions so that you're able to capture them well. What is the impact on COVID-19 on EAC exports and imports to China? And maybe the policy team can just be thinking through this. The survey says the pandemic will cost partner states between $37 billion and $79 billion in output losses. What percentage of this cost will accrue to Kenya, given the size of the country's economy in the EAC?
Thank you. Maybe I'll start from the last one. How much will accrue to Kenya? I may not have the percentage, the actual figures right now that are specific to a particular country, a particular partner state. But of course, the effect on exports, Kenya has been affected definitely on, Kenya is a big producer of, for example, flowers, fruits, and other horticulture products. And this has been really, really huge in terms of losses or reduction in export volumes. So I may not have the particular figures right now, but I have noted the question. I will definitely share. We'll get the actual figures because I may not want to give a figure that probably has been updated as of yesterday, and it wouldn't be as representative as it could be. So I would rather that I get your contacts or your your details, then we can share these figures. They also, in terms of same as export to China, of course, China picks almost majorly minerals from most of the region and other minerals and other mining products. So I'm happy to share the actual figures as well, not off my head right now. In terms of the loans and how has it helped, how are they going to help? Of course, the central banks have announced cushioning funds and extension of loans to not only commercial banks, but also try to help reduce the borrowing rates. So these are definitely going to help in terms of recapitalizing the commercial market, commercial banks, but also even bringing the capital markets to operation in terms of recapitalizing stabilizing the market. So it is going to be easy to access loans to the borrowers, but also in terms of borrowing, lending, the referrals, restructuring your loans. I think almost every partner state is looking at how to help the importers or the business community in terms of trying to extend the loans to defer to a later date such that they continue to operate. So that there has been a lot of flexibilities to keep their business afloat. So these extensions of loans and also restructuring of loans is going to help our commercial banks to lend the manufacturers and the business community so they can be able to continue their operations. Maybe this is what I can say for now. But I welcome the policy team from EABC. Whoever may want to compliment me is welcome.
Maybe they can come
get more questions.
They can come in later. Kimwanga Mhando from East African Grain Council has a few questions. He's talking about how have differences in national COVID responses affected businesses, especially cross-border. In horticulture, an industry insider once intimated that the absence of passengers and subsequent use of passenger aircraft to carry cargo in the cabin increased cargo capacity, which was a blessing to flour exporters. So the impact on logistics needs to be disaggregated per sector. In the third question, he says, what about this aggregation of the sectoral impacts per country so we can see how individual countries have fared during the pandemic? Another issue he's talking about is, given that our governments are cash-strapped, especially during the pandemic, how realistic are our proposals or wide-scale reduction in taxes or levies? What is the likely loss of revenue to government and the expected gain? And maybe for this, Adrian can be pondering about it. Adrian is also in charge of anything to do with taxes at EABC. How will we incorporate the African Continental Free Trade Area in our regional trade and deal with issues of NTBs and recovering our economy? To you, Geoffrey.
Thank you, Lillian. Of course, the differences in trying to fight COVID has led to a bit of disruptions, especially at the borders. As I mentioned during my presentations, that the testing capacities of each country differs in terms of availability of the testing kits, as well as the human capital or the medical officials, personalities at the border that have been designated to operate at the borders. And also, when you go at some borders, you find some may operate 24 hours, others may not operate 24 hours. Some partner states had actually instituted what they call the relay system. That's where, for example, some products coming from a particular country reach the other border, and then they're offloaded. Then trucks from that country will go back. Then the local transporters will pick that cargo. So there's a bit of issues in terms of how they are controlling COVID, how COVID is being controlled. But not forgetting that cargo has to move. At the end of the day, people will have to eat, people will have to be treated, people will have to, products will have to flow. Basically, the economy has to survive. So there has been the divergence in terms of how countries manage this COVID, and that's why EABC has been really very vocal in terms of calling for a coordinated approach. And our CEO has been very, very instrumental in this exercise. He has knocked almost every door to the levels of the ministers, to even a level of, I remember in April when he was able to influence even to ensure that the heads of state sit and ensure that at least the ministers of health and ministers of trade meet to at least come up with a communique that will help the flow of goods. So there's been, of course, different perceptions on how COVID should be treated. Others think or others believe it shouldn't be a scare. So others do not respect, do not even actually recognize the test certificates. So all these have caused issues in terms of moving cargo across the borders, moving products across the borders. So our call is a coordinated approach, and the amount of volumes that has been lost. We're undertaking actually an impact assessment to come up with these figures, and we will definitely share the outcomes from this study. We are commissioning another study on the impact assessment on movement of cargo across the region. We'll be happy to share the outcomes. On disaggregating data, yeah, that is very important in terms of effect and also in terms of the country. How much has been affected, how much has South Sudan been affected, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, etc. It is very noted, and I think at EABC we'll take it up with the policy work to try to look at how we disaggregate the data to ensure have concrete data that can be put out there for public consumption.
Okay, thank you very much, Geoffrey. I see somebody is raising their hand. Hi, Nuabaga. I hope I got your name correct. I can give you one chance to just share your question or your remarks, and then we can wind up. In case he's not ready, I can just go ahead and read some of the remarks shared on the chat. The issue of COVID tests caused. Okay.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have some few points to make on our businesses on the recovery of shortage in our region.
You're quite unclear. Kindly come closer to your mic.
Yeah, my name is John Bosco Sagala. I'm a director in EABC responsible for infrastructure, transport, and resource mobilization. I wish to comment on the business strategy and recovery in the East African region. The free movement of goods and services in the EAC has been maintained with a lot of constraints and untold losses, and the supply situation for staple food and basic necessities is currently secured. However, on the negative side, enterprises across sectors, including the agro-industry and particularly the informal sector, are still suffering. Value chains have been disrupted, and tourism, a major source of income in the region, has come to a complete standstill. Hence, the need to review trade and policy options to address COVID-19 pandemic impacts. There is also a need to reduce import tariffs on essential goods and inputs, reviewing domestic taxation policies on essential goods and produced locally, assessing the potential impact of exchange devaluation, instituting stimulus packages to boost local production and promote import substitution, applying monetary and physical measures to counter inflationary pressures, upscaling trade facilitation to enhance food trade. Finally, East African revenue authorities should suspend customs agents licensing for at least 3 years to enable them recover from these pandemic losses they have incurred. I beg to submit.
Thank you very much, John, for your remarks. And now I'm just going to read one more final comment from the chat. I see some other people also reached out on WhatsApp. I'll give a WhatsApp. From WhatsApp, I'm getting, what are the broad fiscal and non-fiscal incentives sought by EAC businesses to allow the rebound of trade in the region in the pandemic era or post-pandemic? I'll read the question again. What are the broad fiscal and non-fiscal incentives sought by EAC businesses to allow the rebound of trade in the region in the pandemic era and the post-pandemic?
Hello, Lilian.
Geoffrey, kindly go ahead.
Okay, this is Adrian Njau. I want to comment on the issue of the decline of the taxes due to the impact of COVID.
Kindly, Adrian, introduce yourself quickly.
Okay, my name is Adrian Njau. I'm a trade economist with EABC, and I would like to comment on the issue of the customs and domestic taxes. As you know, our survey actually was focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and investment and the recovery strategy. We didn't actually deal with the issue of customs and the domestic taxes, but it is obvious that there is a decline of revenue in terms of the domestic taxes, such as value-added taxes, excise taxes, because of the reduced economic activities in the region. Because, for example, when you are talking of a decline of trade due to the disruption, you find that there is a decline of trade, and obviously there is also a decline in revenue, which actually is being levied on the transaction. So although we didn't focus on the issue of the revenues or taxes, but you find that there is a lot of decline in revenue because economic activities were disrupted as well as trade was declined. And in terms of the fiscal incentives the business community are looking, it is time of, we look, actually, you find that most of the business would like reducing in taxes, such as value-added taxes. We advocate for that, and we find some partner states like Kenya reduce value-added taxes from 16% to 14%. Also, you find some partner states actually even reduce income tax, even the payee, to give relief to the employers. So there is a broader of various incentives business community are looking in terms of reducing taxes. I submit, Lilian.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Kefa, if you can hear this, your question has been answered. particularly the fiscal incentives are in reduction of taxes, VAT, income tax. Geoffrey, you might want to add on this. I also see Job has raised his hand. Job Wanjohi, you're next right after Geoffrey responds to this question.
Eileen, I think it has been ably answered by Adrian.
So Greg, Job, you can go ahead and...
Good afternoon from Kenya here. My name is Job Wanjohi. I'm the head of policy research and advocacy at KAM. I've listened to the presentation and it's quite awesome on the findings that you have gotten from through East African region. My question is around the region of origins, and this issue was addressed. And I know very well that we cannot overcome the challenge of integrating the value chains regionally if we don't have an enabling environment or we don't have conducive environment to do this. We're in agreement in Kenya that that we shouldn't waste the pandemic after it has ravaged Kenya and the region. As EAC, we operate at what is called the custom union, and hence it would be possible to establish sustainable preferential regional value chains in the emerging and nascent sectors, including ventilators, manufacturing. If you're talking of the PPEs manufacturing or even in food industry, whereby we have seen some potential during the pandemic. As EABC, my question is, what enabling environment are you trying to create so that we can see uptick of these regional variations? For instance, when are we completing the EACCT review process? Are you pushing the respective partner states to finalize their country position so that we have a definite date for completion of these? Or if not that, we need to review like now the rules of origin for the EAC so that they are supportive of this variety, or even reduction of the NTBs that we are facing with each other. So what enabling environment is it being created by EABC for this to happen? I submit.
Thank you very much, Job. Just to recap, what enabling environment is being created by EABC. Adrian, maybe you can come in on the issue of CET and the review of rules of origin.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the issue of the CET review, we are trying to push for those countries which have not finalized their review consultation process, and you find that the main challenge which actually is preventing the finalization is the agreement on the maximum CET review, maximum CET rate. And what we are trying to push is to collaborate with the manufacturer association to ensure that all the partner states finalize their consultation and come up with a position which will enhance regional value chain and will encourage the promotion or the production of product within the region rather than depending importing of those products. And I think here we have only one challenge of agreeing on the maximum CT. After that, I think the issue of the CT review will be finalized. That's what I can say. In terms of the review of rule of origin, we have some issues on few areas which we need to do a lot of consultation to ensure that not only the specific sector is benefiting, but the whole economy is benefiting. We have issue on the edible oil where we need to look at it and make sure that the investment which has been put in the region is actually recognized by rule of origin. And here we need to focus to make sure that value addition on that particular sector is also considered when we are doing business in the region. Back to you, Lilian.
Thank you very much. Due to time, we need to wind up. So I'll call upon our ED if he's still with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lillian, and all of you for taking time to participate. Of course, the session was quite interactive, and I can assure for those even their questions were not answered, particularly on SFTA, we have a similar session like this next week, possibly Thursday, and we'll be focusing on SFTA. You know, SFTA is one of the dreams of this continent. And of course, as East African community, we look at it as an, and I see situations where now we need to start thinking more Africa, more regional, more East Africa. Intra-Africa, at the end of the day, is looking at how to increase intra-Africa trade through SFTA. And I think these are some of the lessons that we learned from COVID, that indeed we can depend on one another as partner states, and even not over-depend on what is coming outside the East Africa, outside Africa. And I think these are some of the things, even as we do advocacy as heads of state, meet very soon, some of the issues, and I've seen members ask, can they move goods from Arusha to Ethiopia via Moyale? And those are some of the things we are saying. We need to open the borders, because you see the issue is at the end of the day is to have borderless East Africa. And these things will be very possible. So I want to thank all of you for creating time. And indeed, the CEC is something very, very, very close to us. And it's something we are trying to advocate so that it is possibly finalized at the heads of states meeting as they meet soon, because that is something that has taken quite some time, and it's quite on top of our agenda as EABC. So I look forward to our next meeting, and I thank all of you for creating time. And indeed, let us together build our region, borderless East Africa. We want to thank GIZ, Dr. Kisting, and your team for creating time, and of course for partnering with us to come up with this job. We shall be able to share with our members detailed report, I'm sure, and therefore, you get details of it in case you want to clarify something from this. I thank you very much. You can close here.
Thank you, everyone who took time to attend this session. We really appreciate. We hope to see you next in our next webinar, which is going to be next week on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're now free to leave.
Thank you. Have a very fruitful day.
You too. Goodbye.